A young waiter at an upscale Chicago restaurant thought he knew everything about the world. It was 1975, and Muhammad Ali had just walked through the doors of Romano's, one of the city's most prestigious dining establishments. The heavyweight champion, dressed in a simple but elegant suit, carried himself with the quiet dignity that had become his trademark outside the ring. But what happened next would teach everyone in that restaurant a lesson they'd never forget. The evening started like any other at Romano's. The crystal chandeliers cast warm light over white tablecloths, and the soft murmur of conversation filled the air. Tommy Richardson, a 22-year-old waiter from a small town in Indiana, had been working there for only 3 months. He was ambitious, eager to make his mark in the big city, but his small-town prejudices still clouded his judgment. When Muhammad Ali entered with his wife Belinda and 2 close friends, the entire restaurant seemed to pause. Whispers rippled through the dining room as patrons recognized the most famous athlete in the world. The maitre d', Vincent Caruso, personally escorted them to a prime table near the window overlooking Michigan Avenue. Tommy watched from across the room, his jaw tightening. He had grown up hearing his father's bitter comments about Ali's conversion to Islam and his refusal to serve in Vietnam. To Tommy, Ali wasn't a hero. He was a draft dodger who had abandoned his country and his faith. Vincent approached Tommy with the assignment. Table 12 needs service. Give them your absolute best. This is Muhammad Ali. Tommy's face remained expressionless, but inside, resentment burned. As he walked toward the table, he noticed how other diners stole glances at the champion, some with admiration, others with curiosity. Ali sat relaxed, speaking quietly with his companions, occasionally laughing at something his wife said. "Good evening," Tommy said curtly, not making eye contact. "What can I get you to drink?" Ali looked up with a warm smile. "Peace be upon you, young man. Could we have some water to start, and perhaps you could tell us about your special dishes tonight?" The greeting in Arabic caught Tommy off guard, and his discomfort showed. "We have water, and the menu's right there," he replied, his tone barely professional. Belinda Ali exchanged a concerned glance with her husband, but Muhammad remained calm. "Thank you. We'll take a few minutes to decide." "Zo," as Tommy walked away, he muttered under his breath, just loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Some people think changing their name and religion makes them special. Still the same person underneath." The comment hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Several diners turned to look, shocked by the waiter's unprofessional behavior. At table 12, Ali's friends bristled with anger, but the champion himself remained serene, placing a gentle hand on his friend's arm to calm him. "Let it go, brother," Ali said quietly. "The young man is carrying pain that has nothing to do with us." But Tommy wasn't finished. When he returned to take their order, his attitude had hardened further. As Ali politely requested the grilled salmon, Tommy interrupted. "You know, my father served 3 tours in Vietnam while some people were finding excuses to stay home. Real Americans don't run from their duty." The restaurant fell silent. Every conversation stopped. Forks paused halfway to mouths. The tension was so thick you could cut it with a knife. Ali looked directly at Tommy for the first time, his eyes not angry, but deeply sad. "Son, what's your name?" "Tommy," the waiter replied, suddenly less confident under Ali's steady gaze. "Tommy, I can see you're hurting about something. Would you sit with us for just a moment?" "I'm working," Tommy said, but his voice had lost its edge. "Vincent," Ali called to the maitre d', who had been watching the scene unfold with growing horror. "Could Tommy take a brief break? I'd like to share something with him." Vincent, mortified by his employee's behavior but curious about Ali's response, nodded reluctantly. "5 minutes, Tommy." Tommy remained standing, but Ali continued speaking in a voice that carried throughout the now silent restaurant. "You mentioned your father served in Vietnam. That took tremendous courage, and I honor his service. But let me tell you why I couldn't go." Ali's voice was steady, measured, carrying the weight of conviction. I was raised Christian, Tommy, in Louisville, Kentucky. When I discovered Islam, it wasn't about changing my name or being different. It was about finding peace with God and with myself. My faith teaches me that all life is sacred, that I cannot take the life of someone I've never met in a land I've never seen for reasons I don't understand. The restaurant remained completely silent. Even the kitchen staff had stopped their work to listen. When they wanted to send me to Vietnam, Ali continued, I had to choose between my government and my God. I chose God, not because I'm unpatriotic, but because my faith wouldn't let me harm another human being. I was willing to go to prison for that belief. I gave up the best years of my career, millions of dollars, and faced hatred from people like you're showing me tonight. Tommy's hands were shaking now. The anger in his eyes was being replaced by something else, confusion, maybe even shame. But here's what I want you to understand, son, Ali said, his voice growing gentler. Your father fought for freedom. The freedom for people like me to follow our conscience, to worship as we choose, to stand up for what we believe even when it's unpopular. In his own way, he was fighting for my right to be Muslim, just as I was fighting for my right to live according to my faith. A woman at a nearby table wiped tears from her eyes. An elderly man nodded slowly, understanding dawning on his face. Ali stood up slowly, his imposing frame somehow non-threatening, almost paternal. Tommy, your father and I, we're not enemies. We're both Americans who made difficult choices based on what we believed was right. The difference is, he chose to serve his country through military service, and I chose to serve through standing up for religious freedom and peace. Tommy's facade was crumbling. But people died over there. Good people. My father's friends. You're absolutely right, Ali said, his voice heavy with sorrow. Good people died. Vietnamese people, American people, all of them somebody's children. That's exactly why I couldn't participate. Every person who died was precious to God, whether they wore an American uniform or not. The champion reached into his jacket and pulled out a small, worn photograph. This is from a children's hospital I visited last month. These kids don't care about politics or war or religion. They just want to live, to laugh, to grow up. When I look at them, I see the same thing your father saw in the soldiers he served with. Human beings worth protecting. He handed the photo to Tommy, who looked at it with trembling hands. It showed Ali surrounded by children of all races, all of them beaming with joy. My faith teaches me to love all people, Tommy. That includes you, even when you're angry with me. It includes your father, even though we made different choices. And it includes everyone in this restaurant who's watching us right now, wondering how this conversation will end. Tommy looked around the restaurant for the first time, seeing the faces watching him, not with judgment but with anticipation, hoping for understanding rather than continued conflict. I don't understand, Tommy whispered. If you love America, why didn't you fight for it? Ali smiled sadly. Son, I fought for America every day. I fought for the America where a poor black kid from Kentucky could become heavyweight champion. I fought for the America where people can worship freely. I fought for the America where someone can stand up to their own government when their conscience demands it. That's the America your father was fighting for too. The silence stretched on, but it was no longer tense. It was contemplative, as if the entire restaurant was processing something profound. Tommy looked down at the photograph again, then back at Ali. My father. He came back different. Angry. He drinks too much now. Has nightmares. I guess I blamed you because it was easier than blaming the war itself. War changes people, son, Ali said gently. Your father saw things no human being should have to see. That anger he carries, it's not really about me. It's about the pain of what he experienced. Maybe instead of being angry at me, you could help him find peace. For the first time, Tommy's eyes filled with tears. I don't know how. Start by understanding that there are many ways to serve your country and your fellow human beings, Ali said. Your father served through military duty. I serve through boxing and speaking out for what I believe. You serve by taking care of people in this restaurant, making sure they feel welcome and respected. We're all serving, just in different ways. Ali placed a gentle hand on Tommy's shoulder. The greatest service you can do for your father is to let go of the anger he taught you and find your own path to peace. Show him that the freedom he fought for can be used to build bridges instead of walls. Tommy wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. The entire restaurant watched as the young man struggled with emotions he'd been carrying for years. "I'm sorry," Tommy said finally, his voice barely audible. "I was wrong. About you. About everything." Ali smiled, and it was like sunshine breaking through storm clouds. "There's nothing to forgive, son. You were protecting your father's memory the only way you knew how. That shows love, even if it was misdirected." The champion sat back down and gestured to an empty chair. "Now, would you like to tell me about your father? What was he like before the war?" And so Tommy sat down, and for the next 20 minutes, he told Muhammad Ali about his father, about the man who used to take him fishing, who taught him to throw a baseball, who would sing old country songs while working in the garage. As he talked, the anger melted away, replaced by love and concern for a man who was still fighting a war that had ended years ago. The other diners listened in respectful silence as Tommy opened his heart to a man he had tried to humiliate just an hour earlier. When he finished, Ali nodded thoughtfully. "Your father sounds like a good man who's been carrying a heavy burden," Ali said. "Maybe it's time someone helped him carry it." Tommy nodded, understanding flooding his face. "I need to go home. I need to talk to him." "That's exactly right," Ali agreed. "But first, finish your shift. Take care of your responsibilities here. That's what your father would want you to do." As Tommy stood to return to work, the entire restaurant erupted in applause. It started with one person, then spread like wildfire until everyone was clapping, not just for Ali, but for the transformation they had witnessed, for the power of compassion to change hearts and minds. Tommy served the rest of his shift with a lightness he hadn't felt in years. When he brought Ali's table their meals, he did so with genuine warmth and professionalism. As the evening wound down and Ali's party prepared to leave, Tommy approached the table one final time. "Mr. Ali," he said, "I want you to know that I'm going to drive home to Indiana tomorrow. I'm going to sit with my father and really listen to him for the first time in years. And I'm going to tell him about tonight, about what you taught me." Ali stood and embraced the young man. "That's the greatest victory either of us could ask for, son. Peace be upon you and your family." As Muhammad Ali walked out of Romano's that night, every person in the restaurant stood and applauded again. But this time, they weren't just applauding a famous athlete. They were applauding a teacher, a peacemaker, a man who had shown them that the greatest strength isn't in defeating your enemies, but in turning them into friends. Tommy watched through the window as Ali's car disappeared into the Chicago night. In his pocket was the photograph of Ali with the children, which the champion had insisted he keep. On the back, Ali had written, "For Tommy, may you find the peace your father deserves. Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee, but always lead with love. Muhammad Ali." 6 months later, Tommy received a letter at the restaurant. It was from his father, written in shaky handwriting. "Son, I don't know what happened to you that night in Chicago, but thank you for coming home and really talking to me. I'm getting help now, and for the first time since the war, I'm sleeping through the night. You saved my life. Love, Dad." Tommy kept that letter next to Ali's photograph, 2 reminders that sometimes the greatest battles are won not with fists, but with understanding, compassion, and the courage to see the humanity in everyone we meet. If this story moved you the way it moved everyone in that restaurant, hit that subscribe button and let us know in the comments how you think we can build more bridges in our own communities. Your engagement helps us share more stories like this one, so don't forget to hit that notification bell and give this video a thumbs up to help spread this message of hope and understanding. That's the end of our first block, covering the initial confrontation and Ali's powerful response. The story continues with Tommy's journey home and the lasting impact of that night. Type continue when you're ready for the remaining chapters that show the long-term transformation and how this encounter changed not just Tommy, but everyone who witnessed it. The next morning, Tommy called in sick to work for the first time in 3 months. He couldn't stop thinking about the photograph in his wallet and the words Ali had written on the back. By noon, he had made a decision that would have seemed impossible just 24 hours earlier. He was driving home to Indiana. The 4-hour drive to his hometown of Millfield gave Tommy time to think. He had left home angry, carrying his father's bitterness like a family heirloom passed down through generations. Now, as he drove past cornfields and small towns, he began to see his father not as a hero or a victim, but as a human being who had been broken by experiences Tommy couldn't imagine. Millfield hadn't changed much since Tommy left for Chicago. The same grain elevator dominated the skyline, the same pickup trucks lined Main Street, and the same sense of quiet desperation hung over the town like morning fog. Tommy pulled into the gravel driveway of his childhood home, a modest 2-story house with peeling paint and a sagging front porch. His father, Frank Richardson, was in the garage as always, tinkering with an old Chevrolet that hadn't run in 5 years. At 52, Frank looked older than his age. His hair had gone completely gray, his shoulders were permanently hunched, and his hands shook slightly. Whether from alcohol or memories, Tommy had never been sure. "Tommy?" Frank looked up, surprised. "What are you doing here? Thought you were too important for small-town folks now." The old defensive patterns started to kick in, but Tommy remembered Ali's words about leading with love. "I wanted to see you, Dad. To really talk." Frank wiped his hands on an oil-stained rag, his expression guarded. "Talk about what? You made it pretty clear when you left that you didn't want anything to do with your old man." Tommy took a deep breath. "I met someone last night who helped me understand some things. About you, about me, about what you went through over there." "Who? Some fancy therapist in the big city?" "Muhammad Ali." Frank's face hardened instantly. "That draft-dodging piece of—" "Dad, please," Tommy interrupted gently. "Just listen to me for 5 minutes. That's all I ask." Something in Tommy's tone made Frank pause. His son had never spoken to him with such calm respect before. Reluctantly, Frank set down his tools and leaned against the workbench. Tommy pulled out the photograph and handed it to his father. "He gave me this. Look at those kids, Dad. Really look at them." Frank studied the image, his expression softening despite himself. "What's this supposed to prove?" "He told me something last night that I never understood before," Tommy said. "He said you and he weren't enemies. You both made choices based on what you believed was right. You chose to serve through military duty. He chose to serve by standing up for his beliefs, even when it cost him everything." Frank's hands were shaking more noticeably now. "You don't understand what it was like over there, Tommy. The things we had to do. The things we saw." For the first time in years, Tommy really looked at his father, not as the angry, bitter man he had become, but as the scared 19-year-old who had been sent halfway around the world to fight in a war he didn't understand. "You're right, Dad. I don't understand, but I want to. Will you tell me?" Frank was quiet for a long moment, staring at the photograph. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. "We lost so many good boys over there, Tommy. Kids younger than you are now. And for what? We came home to people spitting on us, calling us baby killers. Then we see guys like Ali, who got to stay home safe while we were dying in the jungle, being treated like heroes." Tommy felt tears welling up in his eyes. Dad, he wasn't safe. He lost everything too. His title, his money, his reputation. He was willing to go to prison rather than compromise his beliefs. That takes a different kind of courage. Courage. Frank's voice cracked. You want to know about courage? Courage is watching your best friend step on a landmine and holding his hand while he dies. Courage is coming home to a country that doesn't want you and trying to pretend you're the same person you were before. The dam had finally broken. Frank Richardson, who hadn't cried since the day he came home from Vietnam, was sobbing in his garage while his son watched, understanding for the first time the depth of his father's pain. Tommy stepped forward and, for the first time since he was a child, hugged his father. I'm sorry, Dad. I'm sorry for what you went through. I'm sorry for being angry at you for being angry. And I'm sorry it took me meeting Muhammad Ali to understand that you're not my enemy. You're my father, and you're hurting. They stood there in that cluttered garage, surrounded by broken machinery and old memories, while 25 years of misunderstanding slowly began to heal. Tell me about Jimmy Morrison, Tommy said softly, remembering the name his father sometimes called out in his sleep. Frank pulled back, wiping his eyes. How do you know that name? You talk about him sometimes, when you have the nightmares. Frank walked over to an old toolbox and pulled out a faded photograph. It showed two young soldiers, arms around each other's shoulders, grinning at the camera. Jimmy was my best friend. Kid from Ohio, wanted to be a teacher when he got back. He was the one who stepped on the mine, 19 years old. Tommy studied the photograph, seeing his father as he had never seen him before, young, hopeful, innocent. What would Jimmy think about you carrying all this anger for so long? Frank laughed bitterly. Jimmy. Hell, Jimmy would probably tell me to quit feeling sorry for myself and do something useful with my life. He always was the smart one. Maybe it's time to listen to him. Over the next several hours, Frank told his son stories he had never shared with anyone, about the friends he had lost, the villages they had tried to protect, the impossible choices they had faced every day. But he also told him about the good times, the letters from home, the care packages, the way the soldiers looked out for each other like brothers. As the sun began to set, Tommy shared his own story about the previous night. He told his father about his anger, his prejudice, and how Muhammad Ali had responded to hatred with love and understanding. You know what the strangest part is, Tommy said. He never once said you were wrong to go to Vietnam. He honored your service, even though you two made different choices. Frank was quiet for a long time, processing this information. I spent so many years hating him for what I thought was cowardice. But if what you're saying is true, Dad, what if instead of hating Ali for not going to war, you honored him for standing up for what he believed in? And what if instead of hating yourself for going to war, you honored yourself for answering your country's call? Maybe you and Ali aren't so different after all. That evening, Frank Richardson did something he hadn't done in 25 years. He called the VA hospital and asked about counseling services. The next morning, he poured his last bottle of whiskey down the kitchen sink. 3 weeks later, Tommy received a phone call at Romano's. It was his father, and his voice sounded different, clearer, stronger. Tommy, I wanted you to know I've been going to those group sessions at the VA, met some good men there, guys who understand what we went through, and I wanted to thank you for coming home that day. How are you feeling, Dad? Better. Not good yet, but better. And Tommy, I've been thinking about what you said, about that Ali fellow. I think maybe I owe him an apology. 6 months after that night at Romano's, Muhammad Ali received an unexpected letter at his training camp. It was written in careful, measured handwriting. Dear Mr. Ali, you don't know me, but my son Tommy served you dinner at a restaurant in Chicago. He told me about your conversation, and I wanted you to know that your words changed both our lives. I spent 25 years angry at you for not going to Vietnam, but I understand now that we were both serving our country in different ways. You stood up for your beliefs when it cost you everything, and I respect that. I'm getting help now for the first time since I came home from the war, and I'm learning to live with my memories instead of drowning them. Thank you for showing my son that there's more than one way to be brave. Respectfully, Frank Richardson, Staff Sergeant, U.S. Army, retired. Ali kept that letter in his training bag and showed it to reporters when they asked him about the criticism he still faced for his stance on Vietnam. This, he would say, is why we keep fighting for understanding instead of fighting each other. Back at Romano's, Tommy had become one of the restaurant's most requested servers. His genuine warmth and ability to connect with people from all walks of life made him a favorite among both customers and staff. Vincent Caruso, the maitre d', had taken notice. "Tommy," Vincent said one evening after service, "I've been watching you these past months. You've changed. There's something different about how you treat people." Tommy smiled, thinking of the photograph he still carried in his wallet. "I learned that everyone who walks through those doors has a story. My job isn't to judge their story, it's to make sure they feel welcome while they're here." "That's exactly the attitude I want in my assistant manager," Vincent said. "The position comes with a significant raise and the opportunity to help train new staff. Interested?" Tommy accepted the promotion, and one of his first initiatives was to implement sensitivity training for all restaurant staff. He would tell new employees about the night Muhammad Ali taught him that the greatest strength comes from understanding, not judgment. 1 year after that transformative evening, Romano's hosted a special dinner for local veterans. Tommy had organized the event, working with the VA hospital to invite Vietnam veterans who were struggling with readjustment. His father was among the guests. As Tommy watched his father laughing and sharing stories with other veterans, he thought about the ripple effects of that one conversation with Muhammad Ali. One moment of choosing love over hate had changed not just his relationship with his father, but had created a chain reaction of healing that was still spreading. During the dinner, an elderly veteran approached Tommy. "Son, your father tells me you met Muhammad Ali. That must have been something." "It was," Tommy replied. "He taught me that the bravest thing you can do is choose understanding over anger, even when anger feels justified." The veteran nodded thoughtfully. "You know, I spent a lot of years angry at that man too. But watching your father tonight, seeing how he's changed, maybe it's time I reconsidered some things myself." As the evening wound down, Frank Richardson stood up to address the room. "I want to thank my son Tommy for organizing this dinner. A year ago, I was a bitter, angry man who had given up on life. But Tommy taught me something he learned from Muhammad Ali, that we can choose to build bridges instead of walls. Tonight, I'm surrounded by brothers I thought I'd lost forever. That's the power of choosing love over hate." The room erupted in applause, and Tommy felt tears streaming down his face. In that moment, he understood what Muhammad Ali had meant when he said that the greatest victories aren't won in the ring, but in the human heart. Later that night, as Tommy was cleaning up after the dinner, he found a note left on one of the tables. It was from a young veteran who had been struggling with addiction and homelessness. "Thank you for tonight. For the first time in years, I don't feel alone. You showed me that there are people who care, who understand. I'm going to call the counseling number you gave me tomorrow. You probably saved my life tonight, and you don't even know it." Tommy folded the note carefully and placed it next to Ali's photograph in his wallet. He was beginning to understand that the lesson Ali had taught him wasn't just about forgiveness or understanding. It was about the responsibility that comes with those gifts. Once you've experienced the power of compassion to transform lives, you have an obligation to share that power with others. 2 years after their first meeting, Muhammad Ali returned to Romano's. Tommy, now the assistant manager, personally escorted the champion to his table. As Ali sat down, he looked up at the young man with a smile of recognition. "Tommy, look at you, brother. You're glowing with purpose." Tommy grinned. "Mr. Ali, I wanted you to know, my father is doing well. He's been sober for over a year now, and he's volunteering at the VA hospital, helping other veterans adjust to civilian life. Ali's face lit up with joy. That's beautiful, son. See how one conversation can change the world. There's something else, Tommy said, pulling out his wallet. He showed Ali the collection of notes and letters he had received from people whose lives had been touched by the ripple effects of that first night. You didn't just change my life and my father's life. You started something that's still growing. Ali examined the letters with wonder. Tommy, this is the greatest championship belt I could ever receive. You took what you learned and multiplied it. That's what real victory looks like. As Ali prepared to leave that night, he turned to Tommy one final time. Remember, son, we are all connected. Every act of kindness, every moment of understanding, every choice to love instead of hate sends ripples through the universe. You've become one of those ripples. Keep spreading. Tommy watched Muhammad Ali walk out of Romano's for the second time, but this time he wasn't watching a famous athlete leave. He was watching a teacher, a mentor, a man who had shown him that the greatest fights aren't won with fists, but with hearts wide open to the possibility of understanding. That night, Tommy called his father to tell him about Ali's visit. Frank listened quietly, then said something that perfectly captured the transformation they had both experienced. You know, son, I used to think Muhammad Ali was my enemy because he made different choices than I did. Now I realize he was my teacher, showing me that there's more than one way to serve your country and your fellow human beings. The real enemy was never Ali. It was the anger and hatred I was carrying in my own heart. And now? Tommy asked. Now I'm free, Frank said simply. For the first time since I came home from Vietnam, I'm truly free. This story shows us that sometimes the most powerful victories happen not in boxing rings or battlefields, but in the quiet moments when we choose understanding over judgment, love over hate. If Tommy's transformation inspired you, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss stories like this. Drop a comment below telling us about a time when someone changed your perspective through kindness rather than confrontation. And don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. Your engagement helps us reach more people who need to hear these messages of hope and healing. Together, we can create more ripples of positive change in our world.